Adam and Eve stood before the forbidden tree, and the fate of humanity depended on a single decision. But what if they had never eaten the fruit? Without the fall, there would be no sin, there would be no death, and perhaps not even redemption. Would we live eternally in Eden, or would we never learn what it is to choose between good and evil? Today we are going to reconstruct this alternative timeline using the biblical narrative itself, and the result is more disturbing than it seems. Stay until the end because the final revelation completely changes the meaning of free will in the story of Adam and Eve. Subscribe now and activate the bell to continue exploring the biblical scenarios that almost no one dares to imagine. Adam's hand is inches from the fruit. Eve is beside him. The serpent has just spoken, that slurred voice saying that God is lying, that they will be like gods, that the fruit opens one's eyes. Sweat drips down Adam's face. Eve stares fixedly at the tree. The fruit glows. It seems almost to pulse. They stand there, frozen in that second where everything can change. And then Adam lowers his hand. Eve takes a deep breath and turns her back. The two simply walk away. The serpent is left alone, coiled on the branch, watching them vanish among the trees. The fruit remains hanging, untouched, and at that exact moment, death ceases to exist as a possibility. Because that is what happens. Without disobedience there is no punishment, and the punishment was clear. On the day you eat of it, you shall die. But they did not eat, so death does not enter. Simple as that. But the consequences of this are not simple, they are absolutely insane. 3 months. Later, Eve discovers she is pregnant, and when the time comes, she lies down, breathes, and the baby comes out. Just like that. Without those hours of agony, without torn screams, without feeling like the body is splitting in half. Does it hurt? Yes. But it is a controllable, natural pain that passes quickly. She holds Cain in her arms, and it doesn't even look like she just gave birth. An hour later, she is walking normally. This changes everything about being a mother. There isn't that physical trauma that leaves a mark. There is no fear of the next birth, so she has another child, and another and another, and Adam, he is there every day working in the garden, but working here is not that thing of sweating until you faint under the sun that burns the skin. It is more like weekend gardening, except it is what sustains you. He plants, things grow fast and strong, there are no pests, there is no drought. The land is absurdly fertile. If you stick a seed in the ground, in 2 weeks you are harvesting. And you harvest a lot. There is food left over, there is always food left over. But now comes the first wave of chaos. Cain grows, Abel grows, then comes Seth, then 10 more, then 50 more, because no one dies. The children of Adam and Eve grow up and have children too, and those children grow up and have children. And no one at any moment dies. There is no disease that kills, there are no fatal accidents, because the world is not hostile in that way. There is no old age that ends in a coffin. People age to a certain point and then simply stop. They stay stable there, with the appearance of being 40 or 50 years old, and it changes no more. So in 100 years, how many people exist? Thousands. In 500 years? Millions. And all alive at the same time. Eden begins to get crowded. Literally. Imagine the garden that was meant for 2 people now with 10,000. The trees that before had infinite space are now surrounded by people. Families begin to need to organize themselves. Who plants where? Who takes care of which part? And for the first time, something arises that did not exist. Competition for space. It is not violent. No one kills anyone for a piece of land. But there is tension. There is argument. There is that discomfort of realizing that paradise was not made to hold the population explosion that happens when no one dies. Then the expansion begins. The first families decide to leave Eden. They are not expelled, they choose to go. They take seeds, they take tools, and they walk out of the gates that were never closed. And when they get outside, they find a world completely wild, but not dangerous. There are dense forests, wide rivers, enormous mountains, but there are no animals attacking. There are no poisonous plants, it is just empty, waiting. They begin to build. The first village outside of Eden. Simple but functional houses. And it works. The land there is also fertile. The water is clean. They plant, harvest, and prosper. Then another family leaves, and another. And in 200 years, there are cities scattered for 1,000 kilometers around Eden. Cities where no one has ever died, where there is no cemetery, because why have one? But then the problem of the elders arises, because Adam and Eve are still alive, and their children, and their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren. Now you have 5-6 generations living at the same time, and guess who rules? The elders. Always, because they saw everything. They remember the beginning. They know how things should be. So every important decision goes through them. And as time stretches, this creates a society completely frozen in hierarchy. You are born, you grow, you have children, you age to a point. And there you stay. For 1,000 years. For 5,000. Doing the same thing, living in the same house, living with the same people. Because no one leaves this cycle. There is no generational renewal. The young never truly take control. Because how are you going to question someone who has 10,000 years of experience? You won't. You obey. Meanwhile, the relationship with God continues, but it changes in texture. In the beginning, God appeared physically. He walked in the garden at the end of the day. He talked directly with Adam and Eve. But now, there are millions of people. How does that work? Does he appear to everyone at the same time? Does he appear in some places and not in others? What happens is that God begins to manifest in different ways. For some it is a clear voice, for others it is a deep feeling, for others it is through dreams. But there are no prophets in the sense of special people who carry the word, because everyone has access. There is no intermediary. You want to talk to God? You talk, he answers. But this creates another strange tension, because if everyone can hear God, and sometimes people hear different things, who is right? There are discussions, not violent but long. Groups form around interpretations. Some think God wants humanity to spread fast. Others think they should go slow. Some think they should focus on building, others on exploring. And there is no rule book, there is no Bible. Because the Bible is the story of redemption, and here there is nothing to redeem. The serpent, meanwhile, has not vanished. It is around, waiting. Because its victory was not eliminated, it was only delayed. And it knows it. Every now and then someone has an encounter. Someone is walking alone in the forest and hears that voice, offering doubt, offering the fruit, which is still there in the center of Eden, and every time until now the person has said no, but the pressure is always there, like a thin crack in a dam, still holding but being tested. As the millennia pass, human culture develops in a bizarre way. There is music, but it is always harmonious. There is no blues, there is no heavy metal. There is no music that expresses anger or despair, because those emotions do not exist in the intense form we know. Art is beautiful, but superficial. Paintings of perfect landscapes, sculptures of perfect bodies. There is none of that disturbing art that is born from pain, because pain, in the deep and existential way, does not exist here. Technology advances but slowly, because there is no urgency. No one is trying to cure disease. No one needs a weapon to defend themselves. No one is hungry. So what motivates innovation? Pure curiosity. And this leads to advances in specific areas. They develop incredible architecture, buildings that last for millennia because they are made with extreme care. They develop agriculture that works with nature instead of against it. But they do not develop medicine. For what? They do not develop military metallurgy. For what? Now, 60,000 years after the moment Adam withdrew his hand, the population of the earth is in the billions, and the planet is feeling the weight, because death controlled population naturally. Without it, growth is exponential. Real space begins to be lacking. Cities expand until they become one single thing, megalopolises that cover entire continents, and for the first time, there is real scarcity, not of food because the land still produces, but of space, of privacy, of silence. And then, finally, the first great moral crisis arises. a group begins to question, should we stop having children? Because if no one dies, and everyone continues to be born, the math is simple. Eventually there is no more room. But how do you say that? How do you deny God's original command, be fruitful and multiply? Except God gave that command when the earth was empty. Now it is full, exploding. Different groups respond differently. Some stop having children voluntarily. They decide that enough is enough. Others continue, saying that God will provide. And this creates the first real division in humanity. It is not war, but it is conflict, ideological, deep. Meanwhile, individuals begin to feel something new, existential boredom. You have lived 100,000 years. You have done everything, seen everything, you know everyone. Every conversation is a repetition. Every place you go you have been before. Novelty has died, and you cannot die. So what is left? Some enter a kind of mental hibernation. They remain functional but empty. Others become obsessed with finding something new, anything. And it is in this desperation for novelty that temptation returns with force. The tree of knowledge is still there, in the center of the original Eden, which is now like a monument, fenced, protected, but accessible. And everyone knows the story. Everyone has heard it 1,000 times. Do not touch. But after 100,000 years of perfect obedience, that begins to seem less like a protection and more like a prison. Because what is there that is so dangerous? What is God hiding? Groups begin to make pilgrimages to see the tree. It becomes like a sacred tourist spot, and each person who goes stands in front of it, looking at the fruit, feeling the same thing Adam and Eve felt. That magnetic attraction, that desire to know, and they return without touching it, but each time it is harder. There is another detail that no one expected. The animals also do not die. So the population of lions, of elephants, of everything has also exploded. And without predation, without a food chain based on death, everyone competes for plants. The ecosystem should have collapsed a long time ago, but it doesn't, because the world was made to sustain this version of existence. Plants grow faster, the earth regenerates instantly. It is as if there were a constant divine patch running underneath everything, keeping the impossible functioning. But people begin to realize that this patch has a cost. Everything works, but it works within very specific limits. You cannot go beyond a certain complexity. You cannot innovate beyond a certain point, because anything that breaks the fragile balance could crumble everything. So humanity remains trapped in a kind of technological and cultural stasis. Slow progress, incremental changes, but never that giant leap that comes from desperate necessity. And then, on an absolutely ordinary day, in a coastal city 15,000 kilometers from Eden, a woman named Talita wakes up and decides she can't take it anymore. She can't take living knowing she will live forever. She can't take the perfection anymore. She can't take the predictability. And she asks a question out loud that no one had ever asked: why can't I choose to die? The question spreads. It goes viral. Because she touched on something that was growing in silence in the heads of millions. Immortality seemed like a blessing. But after enough time it becomes a prison, and if you cannot die, you do not have total freedom. You are trapped in existence, with no way out. This question reaches the ears of Adam. He is still alive, he still leads, at 200,000 years old now. And he calls Talita to talk. He explains it again. The story of the garden, the serpent, the fruit, the choice, how they resisted precisely to preserve eternal life. And Talita hears it all and asks, but that was your choice, not mine. And Adam has no answer, because she is right. The generations that came after did not choose. They only inherited the consequence of a choice that two people made 200,000 years ago. And now they are trapped in it, forever. The tension increases. Movements arise. Some want to go to the tree. Some want to destroy the tree. Some want to protect it even more. And God, who was always present, suddenly becomes silent, not out of rejection, but because this moment needs to be a human choice. Again. And the story freezes here, at this breaking point. Because the world without the fall is not an eternal happy ending. It is an infinite suspense. It is living every day knowing that the crack is there, that the temptation has not died, that the next person might be the one who finally gives in. And when that happens, will the fall of someone after 200,000 years of obedience have the same weight as the fall on the first day? Or will it be worse? Or perhaps in a strange way, will it be liberation?